My name is Diago, and this is a lecture on teaching critical thinking.
Yeah. Okay, let's see how we did this time. The last time our average was around 3. And so we'll see. This time I'll start with 3. When I get to the number you did remember, raise your hand. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Wow. Okay. We were spread over a little bit more, but it looked like our average this time was about 12. Well, the point of this exercise is to say we are not any smarter people in this room than we were 2 minutes ago when the average was about 3. And that was about the same average we got this morning. And there are 15 words on the list. And 3 out of 15 is what percent? Okay, 20. And for my students, 20% is what letter grade in your classes? Okay, F minus, right? Whereas 12 out of 15 is 80%. And so the point is that in 2 short minutes, you could go from performing at a 20% level to an 80% level using critical thinking skills because there were at least two fundamental things that were different between the first one and the second one. Anybody tell me what was one of the things that was different the second time than the first time? Okay, somebody said focus. We knew exactly what we were looking at. And then there was another thing that was different. Okay, yes, exactly. There was a theme to it. We knew how the information was organized, and we also knew how to focus. We knew what the task was. And so the point is that everybody can improve their learning ability, their efficiency, if they know how information is organized. And that is part of what critical thinking is all about. And so I want to go now to Bloom's taxonomy. And again, for you guys this morning, this is a little bit of a review. But Bloom's taxonomy, how many students have seen Bloom's taxonomy? Oh, okay, very few. I just see about 3 people. Well, Bloom's taxonomy is just a hierarchy of learning levels. And if we're talking about critical thinking, and we're going to define critical thinking in a minute, but actually, let me just take from the audience, if you had to define in your own words, what is critical thinking? What would anybody say? Okay, somebody said analysis. Okay. Any other word that you could think of that we could use for critical thinking? Yes. Questioning. Okay, absolutely. And one other answer. Anybody else? One other word? Okay, there's your hand here. Okay, she said, what do you think about after you memorize? Okay, what were you going to say? Processing information. Okay. Reflective thinking. Okay, all of these things go into critical thinking. Well, Bloom's taxonomy is just a hierarchy of learning levels, and the very bottom of that is just knowledge or just memorization. So if you're at knowledge, you have memorized information, you could spit back any definition verbatim, you could give me any formula, you could do, if you're in science courses, plug and chug problems where you just stick stuff in. If you're at comprehension, now you own the information enough that you can explain it in your own words. And you could, as I said this morning, you could explain any concept to your 8-year-old nephew or your 80-year-old grandmother in words they understand. You could give them analogies, you could give them examples. If you're at application, now you can do problems you've never seen before. You can answer questions you've never seen before. And to my students, let me just ask, have you guys ever gotten to a test where you studied everything, you just knew you knew, and you got to the test and it looked like nothing you studied was on the test? Okay. Okay, it happens happens all the time. Okay, now when that happens, what that typically means is that you're not at the application level. And then I'll go up and then I'll ask you guys something about high school. In analysis, if you're at that level, you could take any concept, you could break it down into simpler concepts. And if I asked you to, how many people are in chemistry right now? Are you taking chemistry? No. Okay, math course this semester? Okay. So if I were to ask you to, let's take a trigonometry concept, sines, and I might ask you to come up and give a 3-minute mini lecture on sines. If you had analysis, you could do that, talk for 3 minutes without saying, and it's kind of like, and I think you'd be that conversant, so you could tell me about the Pythagorean theorem. You could tell me about right angles. You could tell me all these different kinds of things if you had analysis. If you had synthesis, now you can come up with something new that has not been designed before. And this happens a lot of times when you're doing research projects. If you're at analysis, I'm sorry, if you're at evaluation, now you can determine whether one theory is better than another theory, one idea is better than another idea. And so to give you a little bit better focus and an idea of exactly what these levels represent, this is just an example of applying Bloom's taxonomy to Goldilocks and the Three Bears. So if you acknowledge, then all you'd have to do is just list the items that Goldilocks used. All that takes is memorization. But if you're comprehension, you might have to explain why did she like Goldilocks chair the best, putting it in your own words. If you're at application, then you might have to describe if she came to your house, what would she use? If you're at analysis, then you might have to think about if this were if this is reality, what events couldn't really happen. If you're at synthesis, then you might have to explain, well, suppose this were not Goldilocks and the Three Bears, but it's Goldilocks and the Three Fish. How would the story be different? You might have to write your own story if we're at that level. And if it were evaluation, then you'd have to judge whether Goldilocks was a good or bad person. And so I'm just going to throw out to the audience as we did this morning. How many of you would say that Goldilocks was a good person? Okay. All right. How many of you would say Goldilocks was a bad person? Okay. How many would you say Goldilocks was neither good nor bad? Okay. And so that would be the other option. Yeah. So now for my students out there, let me just ask, when you were in high school, what was the highest level that you generally had to operate in order to make A's and B's in your classes? And this is important for us as faculty to recognize, because we're talking about critical thinking, and as we've said, students' critical thinking is really operating at those higher levels. And so if we understand where students have been operating before they come to us, then it's very insightful. So for my students out there, just by show of hands, let me know the highest level that you typically had to operate at in high school to make the grades that you made in high school. How many of you would say it's knowledge? Okay. How many of you would say it's comprehension? Okay. Application? Okay. Analysis? Okay. Synthesis and evaluation. Okay. And again, for the benefit of my faculty, I'm going to ask students, typically when you're in high school, what did your teachers do the day before the test? Review. Everybody, I always get that. In unison, review. Okay. And what did they do during the review? Okay. Exactly. We were talking about that this morning. And a lot of times, I know I was surprised to hear this as a faculty member. I expected when I asked this question, now I've asked this question to student audiences all over the country, and it's consistent. The question, what did they do the day before the test? Review. I expected that. That's why students, you guys love getting review sheets from faculty, don't you? Yeah, they're going, yeah. Okay. And then when I asked, what did they do during the review? I was shocked when my students told me they gave us the answers to what was going to be on the test. And somebody said they do. And so what happens is we have all these brilliant students who come to the university, but they are so used to having the review, getting the test questions the day before the test, that they think the same thing is going to continue. Now back to my students. You guys are very, very bright. Now, if you had not gone to class a single day before the day before the test, and you went that day and you paid really close attention to what happened that day, what was the lowest grade you would likely get on the test the next day? That's what they all say, C. Okay. Now, at the university level, what grade are many students striving to get? They say, I just want to get a... Exactly. And so faculty using... This is the first time I've ever done this. You know, I almost feel like Oprah or something. I don't... Just give me a mic and I can run around. And so that's why a lot of our students are not doing what they could do. They're very bright students. Let me ask my students, how many of you, just by show of hands, how many of you studied, let's say you studied a lot in high school? Okay, a few. And most people didn't. And why didn't you study a lot? Didn't have to, exactly. And so when they get to the university, they're thinking the same thing. They're just great scientists using the data points they have that suggest that I don't really need to pay a lot of attention to this until the day before the test. I will study this stuff the day before the test, and I will end up making at least a C, which is what a lot of students are striving for. And so what we're talking about is things that students can do and that faculty can do in order to improve student learning. because there's another question that I wanted to ask students, and that is, and this is going to be kind of a yes or no question. If you, well, not really, okay. If you think about your current GPA, well, how many people are first year students? Ah, okay, so this is just your first semester. Ah, got you. Okay, did everybody get midterm grades? Very good. Okay, all right. And so, how many people would say that when you look at your average for midterm, if your GPA had to reflect either your academic ability or the effort that you put in your studies? Okay, one or two. How many of you would say that your GPA for midterm reflects your intellectual ability? Okay, how many of you would say it reflects the work that you put into your studies? Okay, consistent faculty all over the country. This is what students say. Okay, but the reason that students are not putting a lot of effort into their studies is because they didn't think they needed to. And they didn't think they needed to because they never had to in high school and they made great grades in high school. And so basically what we're talking about then is how do you transition from high school to the university? And for faculty, what kinds of things can we do in order to improve student learning? And so now I'm going to go back to the critical thinking presentation, which is what this was going to be about. And I know I have only 15 more minutes with my students, right? Okay. Oh, thank you. I didn't. Okay, well, that got you. How many people are? How many groups